Welcome Maurice Hines and James Remar to the stage. Francis, I just want to begin by saying it's astonishing the sheer breadth of talent in this movie on every single level. and casting Julian Beck as a gangster is just like one of the...
I'll tell you a funny story about Julian Beck. What you said is true. When a director is surrounded with such a sea of young and exuberant and beautiful talent, as I was in this picture, it's one of the things why I couldn't leave it alone, because, as I said before, so many of the principal players are gone and other people, but the talent that was there was really, and I hope to tell you a little bit about them in a few minutes we have together. But Julian Beck is an interesting, those of you who are too young to know, he and Judith Molina were the Living Theater, and he had very long hair. And when I cast him, when you do a period picture, most of the men don't want to touch their hair because, you know, but you make them. But Julian Beck had this very long hair, and he told me it will never be a problem, I assure you, and I believed him. And he had basically a long ponytail, very, very long. And what he would do is he would put it up in like a bun. If we were shooting him from the left, it would be on the... And you never saw it. But he himself knew how to place it. And he had the very, very long hair, but you never knew it.
Wow. What was it like for you, James and Maurice, to go back and look at this film again and to see it in this beautiful transformation?
Well, for me, it's a little hard because my brother has passed away, and he looks so beautiful. He's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Beautiful, you know? And what's wonderful about it, Francis is just a fabulous person. Besides being a great director, he was a fabulous person, and he just, you wanted to do good for him. And what was one of the big things in our life, that our grandmother was an original Cotton Club showgirl. And so we brought her to the set one day, and she looked at the set, and she said, I got to meet this Coppola man. I got to meet this Coppola man. I said, why, Granny? Why, Granny? She says, because I was a young girl when I did this, when I was a showgirl, and it looks just like, I was wondering if he was going to catch it, and it looks just like when I was a young girl. And we were so proud to be there for Granny, you know. And I got to tell you, Francis is not only a great director, he's really a great person, because Gregory and I had never done a movie before, and Gregory had done a few movies, and he said, Maurice, you know, this is not the ordinary way. You know, because Francis is just you want to do good for him. You want to be great for him. And I really did. I wanted to be really good for him. Was I good, Francis?
You were wonderful. You were wonderful.
And it was great. All our friends were in it. The young girl who played our sister, Winona's here, and she was in it. And all these wonderful dancers, they just loved Francis. All the girls, they said, oh, he's so cute. He didn't know that.
But I want to say something about the Cotton Club beauties, because, of course, I was directing this picture, and many of my friends, some of whom you honored recently, they all wanted to meet these Cotton Club. And I have to say something about those women. They were the most ladylike, wholesome, good young ladies I think I've ever met, because despite the fact that they were so pretty and they were so alluring and they were dancing and what have you, but they were really ladies. Mm-hmm. Every one of them. They were so kind and so supportive. I could tell you so many stories, because this movie was a little bit like being made on a wharf during a war, because there were two entities that were at war. And of course, I had the contractual right to be the captain of the ship, as it were. But some of the other people were from fields where the contracts and stuff just get pushed off the table, which they did. And it was really sort of very divisive at the time. And the cast was my comfort because they knew what was going on, and they were so kind, and they were such young ladies. I'll never forget them.
James,
I'm going to ask a request. I'm looking at the sea of people. Where is my daughter? So, would Sophia just wave her hand so I know where she is? Okay, now I know. Sophia is there. I won't.
The dingbats.
Yeah, now I know where my family is. Okay.
James, you wanted to
Well, I can say that this feels like the premiere that the Cotton Club should have gotten.
Well, it's almost 40 minutes longer. This is almost 30 some odd minutes longer than when we opened it.
It doesn't drag at all. It goes and goes and goes, and I think pacing was an issue initially, and people complained about it, but now it just goes like a locomotive.
The thing is, sometimes when you make a film shorter, you're really making it longer because the people don't understand the story, and they're not as involved. So it was one number after another. But here, first of all, it has its balance back because it was always two interwoven principal stories, one white and one black, and it was equally balanced. And when it got, when things are out of balance, they start to fall apart, obviously.
Yeah. I also have to ask, is Gretchen Rennell here? Gretchen, are you here? She's your casting director.
I remember.
Yep. And but I guess she didn't make it to the screening, but I heard from her earlier. She did an amazing job. I guess that what we should do is perhaps open it up for questions. And yeah, right there. A lot of.
Such an honor to see you all. Fabulous. Mr. Coppola, was it difficult to secure the rights to the music for the movie?
I'll repeat the question. Was it difficult to secure the rights to the music?
Interestingly, the music was mostly from a company called Mills Music, and we made an overall deal with them. It caused a problem for this version, though, because we made an overall deal with them for all of the rights of the many, many wonderful music involved. But when I can understand how the other side felt, well, it's too long, it's too much dancing, too much tap dancing, and in those days they felt too many black people. I guess they were, what was this, 20 years ago?
It was 35 years ago, right? Wasn't it? No, it was 1984.
I remember I'll give you an example. I remember when I was a kid, 17-year-old, the first black person I ever met was named Doug, and it was in college, and I sat next to him, and I was about 20, almost 20 years old, so that shows what our lives were like. We didn't have the opportunity to make friends and to know people. So I remember reading a book by, I guess, Arthur Clarke called Childhood's End, and it was this classic science fiction. And in Childhood's End, there is a African-American character who's principal in the story, and he's there at all the things. And I remember reading the book and thinking, it's so odd, that's so strange. I mean, it's interesting, but it was not what our life was like. So that I think when the film came out and they said too many black people, I think the people weren't used to the real principle about how that works, is that when you become friends with people, you no longer, you say, oh, that's Joe, that's Lou, that's so-and-so. You don't know what their group is anymore, because they're, like, for example, Danny DeVito is a tiny, tiny person. But when you know him, he's a gigantic person, because his personality is so the key is friendship, because when you make friends with people, then you really know who they are. I remember once Danny told me, I had him going up the stairs, and I kept making him do it over and over. And he says, Francis, it's hard for me to get up the stairs, and I hadn't thought of it. So what I would say about the criticism of the folks who felt it was too long and there was too tap dance and too many black stories, people weren't used to intimate family life of other folks that they hadn't had the privilege of being friends with. And so I sort of, I guess in perspective, I understand what was going on then I was just terrified that they were going to come and take the film away, which they threatened, and there was a big law case, and they tried to do that. But I see it differently as I now see everything differently, and I certainly see this film differently. And in fact, I'd like to say something that's outrageous, and my family will think it is, but you know, I would really like tonight, there's such a beautiful reception of this incredible collection of talent. There's one talented person, controversial, but nonetheless talented, and I want to dedicate the movie to him tonight, if I may, and that's to Robert Evans. The kid stays in the picture. I had hoped, despite all of the past warfare and what have you, I had hoped, you know, he's about, I guess, 10 years older than me, and I had sort of hoped he could come and be here and share it, and he wasn't well enough to do that. But you know, he was the originator of the Cotton Club. He was going to direct it, in fact, and I was sort of sucked into it. I thought that he just suddenly was scared that it was such a big project, but in fact, the real problem was that they didn't have the financing, and they felt if they had gotten me hooked up to it, they might. But nonetheless, you know, it was his idea to do it. He put together so many of the talented people before I even arrived on the scene: Milena Cananero, the people who did the extraordinary musical reconstruction, because it really sounds just like that music of that time, and that was, and he was the one who cast Gregory Hines and Richard Gere. And the problem he had, why he first suckered me in, is that Richard Gere did it on the condition that he would not be a gangster, that he would only do it if he could be a cornet player or a trumpet, because he really did play the cornet. And so the problem was that there were no white musicians in the Cotton Club ever. So here was a guy saying he wouldn't be a gangster, and he would only be it if he could be a musician, and with these givens. And so I got a phone call from Robert Evans, who was not my best friend at that time, and he was very touching. And he said, "Francis, I have a big problem with my child. You have to help me." And I said, I knew he had a kid. And I said, "What is it? What can I do? You know, I'm a sucker for kids, always have been." And I said, "What can I do? How can I help?" And then he said, "Well, it's my movie, The Cotton Club." I said, "Oh, all right." He said, "I have a big problem, and can I come and see you and bring the two actors who were the two." And the problem, and they sat with me, and that's when Richard Gere told me he would only do it if he could be a musician and play in the Cotton Club Orchestra, but he couldn't because there never had been a white cornet player in it. And of course, Gregory was just the most wonderful person. You just fell in love with him as soon as you knew him. And I said, "Well, let me noodle it, let me think." And that noodling it, step by step, each time sucked me in deeper and deeper. And then he would say, "Oh, you have to be the writer, you have to do it." And I said, "Okay, I'll give you 3 weeks for free, and I'll do my best." And and I did my best. And he said, "Oh, the script is so great, and the idea is so great." But then later, when we were arguing, he said, "I thought it was a piece of whatever." So it was this strange process where little by little I kept getting suckered in and suckered in and suckered in until ultimately he wanted me to direct it. And I said, "I won't go through what I went through on The Godfather with you second guessing me every minute, and I just won't do it." And I said, "What I will do is you direct it, you were the director, and I'll come for a week and sit there and be, you know, the sort of security blanket, and I'm sure you'll do fine, and I'll just fade away." And he said, "No, only you could do it." Then he did the fatal thing for me. He said, "Would you just come?" And in fact, Sophia came when we did that. He said, "I'll fly you and your family to New York, and I just want you to meet the talent." And then they put on this extraordinary show, and I met all of the people who were in the movie auditioning and doing these real reconstructed numbers they had worked on from the Cotton Club, and it was pretty evident what a wealth of talent it was, and that's how I ultimately. But the first week, I had the total control, final cut, and all that. The first week is I cast Fred Gwynne to be Frenchie. and he and I got an irate phone call from Bob. He says, I will not. What was he famous for?
Monsters.
I will not have a monster in my movie. And I said, that's it. You can't even come on the set. And the set was back and forth warfare. And some of the people who had financed this picture were very, I don't know how to say it, but very...
Did he like the idea of Joe D'Alessandro as Lucky Luciano?
That was my idea.
I'm sure it was your idea, but it's an amazing idea.
He was great.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is that all of a sudden, some heavyweight from Chicago came and was sitting on the set and was watching everything. And this was a little scary. But the most amazing thing happened is he was bright, and he realized that what I was trying to do, I ought to do. And so this heavyweight ultimately was my protector during the picture. And he's credited on the movie. That was Joey Cusumano. So, basically, what do I know about life is that you don't know what's coming next. But I'm sincere when I say I'd like to dedicate the screening tonight and the wonderful response to Bob Evans, because I'm sure by doing that he'll hear about it, and in a way he'll realize that he is definitely part of the Cotton Club. So thank you.
There's so many more things to talk about, but there's another show coming in, and they're ushering us out.
Four more questions?
I think we can only do one more question if we.
I can answer them really fast.
Yeah.
Okay. Shout the question out, and I'll repeat it.
Okay.
It's such an honor to be asking you guys a question. The scene where Vince dies, right after that, there's a call that is placed, and in that shot, on one hand, this man is informed of his death, and then the camera pans and he's sketching a horse.
Oh yeah.
What is the thought behind that?
Well, there was in the
sketching of the
dialogue
horse,
is that
yeah.
the real Oni always wanted to be on a horse ranch, and he used to draw pictures of horses. And at the end, and he died on a horse ranch. He went on a horse ranch. So most of what's in the movie is based on. It's assembled from lots of things with the wonderful collaboration of William Kennedy, who was my collaborator. But it's all based on real stuff. Everything in it really happened. Yes.
Influences on the musical numbers.
Yeah, but it plays almost like a musical.
Well, my family is all in that business, and my uncle, who is here, was the original conductor of New Faces of '52 and
he's
The Boyfriend.
100 and your uncle is?
He's here. Wave your hand,
Yeah.
Uncle Kiki. He's 102.
Yeah.
There he is. He was the one. He was the one who met the young Julie Andrews, who was probably about 19 years old and thought she was an extraordinary talent, and ultimately conducted My Fair Lady. So I've been in the musical. I've been in love with musical theater all my life. Yes.
Francis, they're cutting us off. I'm sorry. We have to make room for the next show.